The air in the studio crackled with anticipation, a manufactured tension designed to draw viewers into the familiar theatre of political combat. Gleaming sets, bathed in a cool, authoritative blue, framed the commentators in unflinching high definition, ready to dissect the future of a fractured Congress. Thursday night's live political special on paper was another predictable roundtable discussion, a seemingly harmless exploration of bipartisan possibilities. Yet positioned strategically at opposite ends of the polished expanse, sat two individuals whose history of crossing the aisle held none of the comfortable familiarity of old adversaries. Florida Congressman Byron Donalds, a study in composed confidence, his on-camera demeanor a carefully constructed edifice of calm calculation, rested his hands neatly, his tie a perfect knot, his voice a smooth baritone waiting to be unleashed. Across from him, Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas radiated a palpable energy, her directness of speech mirroring the sharp angles of her presence. Those in the know understood this wasn't just another segment. The potential for sparks was undeniable. Still, no one, not even the most seasoned producers whispering through their headsets, could have predicted the raw, personal conflagration that was about to erupt. The moderator, a middle-aged journalist whose reputation for neutrality was his carefully cultivated brand, initiated the proceedings with a seemingly innocuous prompt. In this deeply polarized climate, what fundamental steps can we take towards genuinely bridging the divide that separates our parties? Byron Donalds, ever the pragmatist, offered the first response, his tone measured, devoid of partisan fire. I believe it begins with an unflinching commitment to truth. And the fundamental truth is that the American people are not nearly as divided as the political machinations in Washington would have us believe. We share core values: the safety of our communities, the well-being of our children, the quality of their education. It is the narratives we allow to take root that twist these shared concerns into the venom of hate. His delivery was conversational, the tone of a man stating a simple fact across a dinner table. Representative Crockett listened intently, a subtle furrow in her brow, the only outward sign of her internal counterpoint. Then the moderator's attention shifted. Congresswoman Crockett, your perspective? Jasmine leaned forward, her gaze intense. It is facile to speak of unity, Congressman, when your lived experience has insulated you from the very realities that perpetuate division. You can articulate the notion that we are not fundamentally divided, but for many of us the insidious reality of race permeates every facet of our lives. We do not have the luxury of pretending that race is not an intrinsic part of the problem. A palpable shift occurred in the studio's atmosphere. The air grew thick, not with outright hostility, but with a tension that prompted a collective, almost imperceptible inhale from the control room staff, their eyes glued to the monitors. The panel navigated through the expected terrain: healthcare debates, the complexities of inflation, the ever-present spectre of gun reform, standard topics handled with practiced ease. But as the moderator teed up a question concerning the persistent disparities in educational opportunities across different communities, Jasmine Crockett interjected, her tone sharp yet controlled. You know, Congressman Donald speaks eloquently about the needs of black communities, she began, her gaze fixed on him. But I find myself questioning how someone can truly claim to speak for the totality of our experience when his personal life has seemingly distanced him from those very realities. How can one genuinely understand the nuances of our struggle when he has married into whiteness and appears to leverage that union to rationalize policies that fundamentally fail to reflect the lived truth of so many black Americans? The room seemed to exhale in unison, the silence absolute. Even the typically hushed whispers of the camera crew, coordinating cues and adjusting lenses, ceased. The moderator's composure flickered, a momentary widening of his eyes betraying his shock before he swiftly redirected his gaze towards Byron Donalds, an unspoken question hanging in the air. "How will you respond to this?" Donalds remained outwardly unmoved. He did not turn to the camera, did not play to the unseen audience. His focus was solely on Jasmine, his gaze direct and unwavering. His voice, when it came, was remarkably calm, a low register that commanded attention. "Are you suggesting, Representative Crockett, that the person I have chosen to love somehow diminishes my blackness?" Jasmine held his gaze, unflinching. "I am suggesting, Congressman, that your perspective is inevitably shaped by your experiences, and some of those experiences may create blind spots, preventing you from fully grasping the realities faced by those whose lives have been fundamentally different." "And you believe," Donalds countered, his voice still measured, but with an undercurrent of steel, "that my choice of spouse dictates my ability to represent my community? You believe that my love for my wife somehow invalidates my understanding of my own roots?" "I am saying," Crockett reiterated, her tone firm, "that your vantage point is different, and that difference may color your interpretation of the challenges our communities face." "You don't get to define my roots, Representative," Donalds stated, the weight of his words palpable. It wasn't a shout, not a heated outburst, but a declaration that hung heavy in the air, compelling everyone to lean in, to resist the urge to glance at their phones, a silent acknowledgement that something significant was unfolding. The moderator, sensing the derailment, attempted to interject. "Let's try to refocus our discussion on policy." But the moment had landed, a raw, personal exchange that transcended the sterile confines of political debate. That brief, less than 30-second interaction had ignited a spark that threatened to erupt into a national firestorm. Yet, in that immediate aftermath, the full scope of what had transpired remained unseen, the room still subtly shifting, the aftershocks yet to be felt. The abrupt cut to a commercial break, 30 seconds of cheerful car insurance ads and idyllic vacation getaways, felt grotesquely out of sync with the tension that had just gripped the nation. Inside the studio, Byron Donalds sat in stark stillness, his eyes fixed on the floor, his arms crossed in a gesture of quiet contemplation. He wasn't visibly angry, not in the explosive way many might have expected. Instead, he appeared deeply thoughtful, his expression suggesting a man meticulously calculating the cost of letting such a deeply personal attack slide. When the broadcast returned, the moderator, his composure visibly ruffled, made another attempt to regain control. "Let's move on to the crucial issue of criminal justice reform. Representative Donalds, how would you—" But Byron Donalds lifted a hand, slowly, deliberately, interrupting the moderator's carefully constructed pivot. "I am going to address what was just said." That single sentence, delivered with quiet resolve, sent a clear signal to the millions watching. This conversation was far from over. His tone was neither defensive nor agitated, but there was a distinct undercurrent of disappointment, perhaps even a hint of something akin to betrayal. "I married my wife," he began, his gaze steady, "because she is the most decent, honorable human being I have ever known. We met long before the glare of politics, before any of this partisan division. She was working tirelessly in community health outreach, dedicating her life to serving others. We fell in love. That is our story, a deeply personal narrative that is nobody's political football." He paused, not for dramatic effect, but because the weight of his own words seemed to momentarily catch in his throat. "My children are of mixed heritage, yes. And they have faced real, tangible questions about their identity, about the often harsh realities they witness in the news, about the ignorant comments they sometimes encounter in school, and I answer those questions as a black father, grounded in my own experiences, not as a mere representative of a political party. The other panelists remained frozen, their expressions a mixture of shock and uncomfortable empathy. Even Jasmine Crockett sat in an uncharacteristic stillness, her features unreadable, though her posture had subtly shifted, her shoulders drawn in slightly. Byron continued, his voice low, but carrying a profound weight. And let me be unequivocally clear, if you believe that my love for my wife somehow compromises my ability to fight for the betterment of our communities, then you are, in essence, telling every black man who has dared to love across racial lines that his voice is inherently less valid, that his heart somehow disqualifies his truth. The camera cut to the moderator, who remained silent, recognizing the gravity of the moment. Byron pressed on, his voice calm yet cutting. What we are not going to do is perpetuate the insidious notion that proximity to whiteness equates to betrayal. That is not liberation, that is merely the construction of a different kind of cage. The silence in the studio was palpable, the tension so thick you could almost touch it. One of the producers in the control room was tapping her pen with nervous energy, while a younger staffer mouthed something urgently into his headset. Jasmine Crockett finally broke the silence, her voice soft. "Congressman, I want to reiterate that I am not attacking your marriage. My focus is on the inherent lens through which we view and approach solutions to the systemic issues that plague our communities, and I maintain that that lens is inevitably shaped by our lived experiences." "And I am telling you," Byron countered, his gaze unwavering, "that my lens includes love, Jasmine. It includes the profound experience of building a family that navigates the complexities and beauty of both worlds. That does not make me less aware, it makes me infinitely more aware." Another heavy silence descended. Then Byron Donalds turned his gaze directly into the camera for the first time that night, his expression earnest. "You want unity? It doesn't begin by questioning the fundamental loyalty of individuals based on the person they choose to build their life with. That is not the path forward." The moderator cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the sudden quiet, his composure visibly shattered. Thank you both. We're going to take a very brief pause." The network cut away mid-sentence, the abrupt transition underscoring the unprecedented nature of the exchange. And just like that, the entire country had a new, deeply uncomfortable topic to grapple with. In living rooms across Phoenix, Dallas, Cincinnati, and Bakersfield, viewers frantically rewound the segment. Families paused their screens, a spectrum of reactions playing across their faces, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others clapping in fervent agreement, many simply staring in stunned silence. Within minutes, Twitter exploded. "Donalds destroys Crockett" became a trending phrase, a simplistic and inflammatory summation of a far more nuanced and painful moment. The reactions were anything but uniform, a fractured reflection of the nation itself. Some hailed Donalds as righteous, others dismissed his response as performative. A vocal minority rallied to Crockett's defense, arguing that her point about perspective had been deliberately stripped of its context. Yet a unifying sentiment emerged. This was not politics as usual. In less than 3 volatile minutes, the entire tenor of the debate had shifted from the dry language of bills and budgets to the raw, exposed nerves of identity, family, and the unspoken limits of political criticism. But what most people missed in the immediate aftermath was the deeper current that had driven Byron Donalds' response. His anger wasn't rooted in a challenge to his political stances. It stemmed from the deeply personal act of reducing his life, his love, to a mere prop in someone else's argument. Outside the sterile confines of the studio, the storm was only beginning to gather momentum. The clock had just ticked past 9 p.m. when Byron Donald stepped off the set, his blazer hanging loosely in his hand, the crisp dress shirt beneath damp with the unforgiving studio heat. Yet, it wasn't the harsh glare of the lights that had caused him to break a sweat. He moved through the quiet, narrow, sterile hallway, a solitary figure amidst the hushed activity. A couple of staffers leaned against the wall, their whispers abruptly ceasing as he approached. One of the interns, his gaze averted, offered him a bottle of water. He declined with a curt nod. In a nearby green room, Jasmine Crockett sat alone, the glow of her phone illuminating her face as her fingers flew across the screen, likely navigating the digital tempest she had unleashed on Twitter, perhaps engaging in a flurry of group chats. She didn't look up as he passed, neither of them uttering a single word. Byron Donalds was not a man prone to raising his voice in front of cameras, but he had been raised in a world where words were a potent currency, and tonight he had spent them with a deliberate and profound purpose. Outside, a small gathering of reporters had already begun to form at the curb, their microphones poised like weapons. One attempted to breach his composure. "Mr. Donalds, any comment on Representative Crockett's remarks?" He didn't break his stride, his gaze fixed ahead. But once inside the sanctuary of his car, he sat for a long moment, the engine remaining silent, enveloped in a heavy quiet. His phone buzzed twice, missed call. His wife, Talia. He dialed her number back immediately. "Hey," she answered, her voice a familiar warmth, yet tinged with a discernible note of concern. She had clearly witnessed the unfolding drama. "You okay?" "I'm all right," he exhaled, the tension slowly seeping out of him. "You saw it, of course?" "They're playing it on every channel right now. It's already on the front page of the Times." A long pause stretched between them, the unspoken weight of the evening hanging in the air. Byron leaned his head against the steering wheel, the leather cool against his temple. "I didn't want to bring you into this," he said quietly. The vulnerability in his voice stark. "Byron?" she replied, her voice firm and unwavering. "I've been in this since the first time you walked into Congress. And I'm incredibly proud of what you said. You didn't let them bait you. You stood up for us." A faint smile touched his lips, a small crack in his carefully constructed composure. I didn't expect her to go there, not like that. She doesn't know us, Talia. People who don't know our story will always try to write it for us, Byron, she said. Her words a quiet truth that resonated deep within him, hitting harder than any of the barbs thrown in the studio. Across town, in a dimly lit hotel bar near the Capitol, 3 other congressmen watched the replay on mute, the gravity of the exchange etched on their faces. One of them, a moderate Democrat from Ohio, nodded slowly, swirling the ice in his drink. "Damn," he murmured, "that was deeply personal." His colleague leaned in, his expression thoughtful. "Think it'll backfire on her?" The first congressman shook his head slowly. "I don't know. But you don't talk about a man's family like that on live TV. Not unless you're prepared for the heat." Inside a small, unassuming apartment in Tulsa, a retired schoolteacher named Arlene sat with her 14-year-old grandson, the clip playing for the 3rd time on their small television screen. The boy looked up at his grandmother, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Why was that lady talking about his wife like that, Grandma?" Arlene didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the screen. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Because sometimes, baby, people confuse pain with permission. Just 'cause you've been through something hard doesn't give you the right to say anything you want." The boy considered her words, his young mind grappling with the complexities of the exchange. "I think he handled it good," he finally said. Arlene nodded in agreement. "Me too." Meanwhile, Byron Donalds was far from finished. The next morning, he quietly requested a one-on-one sit-down with a local television station in Tampa, deliberately choosing a platform close to home, eschewing the national cable news frenzy. In the interview, he refrained from name-calling, from any hint of gloating. "I'm not interested in tearing Representative Crockett down," he stated calmly, his gaze direct and sincere. "But I do want people to reflect on the kind of political discourse we are fostering. We can vehemently disagree on policy. We can engage in passionate debate on the floor of the House. But the moment we begin to weaponize someone's family, their most personal relationships, we lose far more than just the argument. We erode the very foundations of human decency." The clip aired at 6 p.m., devoid of sensational headlines or dramatic graphics, just a quiet, grounded response that spoke volumes in its restraint. Even those who fundamentally disagreed with his politics found themselves pausing, paying attention, not because they had suddenly changed their views, but because he had tapped into a shared sense of humanity, reminding them of a fundamental truth they had almost forgotten. Sometimes, true strength lies in refusing to throw the next punch, even when the perfect opportunity is laid before you. But Jasmine Crockett, equally resolute, was not about to let the narrative solely belong to her adversary, and what she said next only served to escalate the stakes, ensuring that the reverberations of that Thursday night exchange would continue to ripple across the nation. Friday morning hit the news cycle with the force of a thunderclap. Cable news outlets led with the contentious clip, every show, every segment dissecting the raw exchange. Split screens became ubiquitous, juxtaposing Byron Donalds and Jasmine Crockett, their faces etched with the residue of the previous night's tension. Headlines scrolled across the bottom of the screen like urgent dispatches from a battlefield. Racial comment sparks live TV clash. Donalds responds to Crockett's controversial statement. Family, politics, and the line that was crossed. By mid-morning, Jasmine Crockett's name was trending across every social media platform, a digital lightning rod attracting both fervent support and fierce condemnation. Her communications team had swiftly moved into damage control, deploying a pre-recorded video on her social media channels just after 9 a.m. Seated before a backdrop of the Texas flag, her blazer sharp, her chin held high, her message was concise and unyielding. "What I articulated last night was not an assault on Congressman Donalds's family," she stated with conviction. "It was a necessary critique of perspective. If we, as a nation, are unwilling to acknowledge the profound ways in which our personal relationships and experiences inevitably shape our political viewpoints, then we are not engaging in a genuine or honest conversation about the complex issues that confront us." Notably absent was any hint of apology, any direct acknowledgement of Talia Donalds. Instead, her message was a clear declaration of her intent to stand her ground, to reframe the narrative on her own terms. Backstage at a CNN studio in Sacramento, a seasoned political analyst watched the clip with headphones clamped over his ears, his arms crossed in thoughtful contemplation. "She's trying to reframe it," he muttered to a nearby producer, "but that was a deeply personal hit. If this story made you pause even for a moment, share it with others, not in anger, but in pursuit of truth. And if you hunger for more narratives that cut through the chaos to reveal what truly matters, hit that subscribe button. Our journey uncovering justice has only begun."